Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy. We're doing our Halloween special today. The first part releases today. The second part will release on Halloween, so you only have to wait a couple days on that one. And what do you got for us?
Well, today we have the Toolbox Killers, who are Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris. Now, they are going to rape, torture, and murder at least 5 teenage girls in California with an array of brutality using screwdrivers, ice picks, pliers, etc. to torture and kill them. They also...
Is this in the 70s? Because
I'm getting there. They also tape record the rapes, one of which was found and used during their trial. So the tape recordings are kind of what make this case a notorious case, because it's not often you hear the sounds of someone who's being tortured. So, anyway, so that's something. I'm not going to play them because it's disgusting. But their killing spree lasts for 5 months during 1979.
Ha! 70s. We like the 70s. Well, I don't know if we necessarily like them or if there's just an abundance of fucked uppery that happens in...
So I feel like it's because the 60s was a lot of drug exploration, and then it led way into the 70s. There was way too much trust in strangers and love going on in the 60s, which paved the way for people to be way too trusting in the 70s, and all the hitchhiking and everything. It was easy pickings.
Hey, I wonder if all the drug use caused some brains to snap that might not have, you know?
Yeah, could be. All the LSD can't be good for the old noodle. Now, an interesting tidbit would be Southern California is like psycho-central, because between 1950 and 2000, they produce 10% of the world's serial killers.
Holy shit.
It's a pretty grim reputation.
That's a lot. I know it's 50 years, but 10% is a lot.
Yeah, and you figure it's probably more than that because they don't catch all the people who murder.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is. Now, back to Bittaker and Norris. Their victims were very nice, good girls. They weren't delinquents. So they were well-behaved girls. They didn't have any sort of criminal record or anything, which is it makes it even more tragic. Not to say delinquents deserve to be murdered, but it's not like they were picked up in the wee hours of the morning or doing anything
questionable.
Yeah. But on November 1st, 1979, in the early morning, a jogger discovers the nude, lacerated body of a teenage female. This discovery would lead to the arrest and investigation of 2 ex-convicts for her murder and the murder of 4 other young girls.
Wow.
So since we find the background of what makes a murderer kind of thing, we're going to start with Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker, who was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on September 27th, 1940. Now, he was an unwanted child who was eventually placed in an orphanage by his birth mother.
Jeez, he really was unwanted.
So,
I thought you were going to say it was an unwanted pregnancy, but yeah. Surprise, not, hey, I'm actually going to give you up.
No, it's not till later in life that Bittaker actually let somebody interview him, but he'll say in that had even one good parent, he would have turned out different, which is just passing the buck, really, because plenty of people have fucked up childhoods and they don't turn into serial killers.
Yeah.
So he kind of just diminishes his own role and all the things he does by saying it's not his fault because he was raised shitty.
Way to take accountability there, buddy.
Well, if you listen to any of his interviews, he'll even blame the victims. Like, well, if she would have been more aware of her surroundings, it wouldn't have happened.
What?
Right. So perhaps if you weren't trying to abduct, rape, and murder people, that also would make it not happen. But anywho, getting ahead of myself. So Bittaker was born to a teen mom and an abusive dad. He'll claim that his mom would put cigarettes out on his body. I don't know if that's true or not. Because again, the guy's not trustworthy. Does he have scars?
Well, I feel like if you put a cigarette out on a kid, they're going to scar.
I would think so. I don't know. But he's eventually adopted by George Bittaker and his wife as a baby. Now, these are his aunt and uncle, so I find it interesting.
Wait. Was it his adopted mom that was putting cigarettes out on him, or his biological?
The biological mom.
But now, he was a baby, so how can he remember that?
That's why I was saying the whole... I don't know how true that is. His aunt and uncle are the ones who eventually adopt him. Now, that was in an interview where he was talking. Now, when I found the information that said he was adopted by George Bittaker and his wife as a baby, that was in a different source. So I'm going to go with, he's the one who said they were his aunt and uncle. So I find it interesting that there's that discrepancy. But again, I'm going to go with, he said they were his aunt and uncle. So his adoptive father worked in aviation, and that caused the family to move around frequently during his childhood. So it made it hard for him to have friends anyway. So it was just like that alienated him, trying to moving and then restarting every time. But beyond that, he would say his adoptive parents treated him more like a boarder, in the sense that they would feed him, they would clothe him. But beyond that, they didn't speak to him much, which does make me think that it is his aunt and uncle, and they felt burdened by having him. Rather than...
Did they have other kids?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, yeah, that would definitely be a burden. Granted, if they already had a bunch of kids and then they added him, that would also be a burden, but at least he would mesh in, kind of.
Yeah, he would have other kids. I'm pretty sure he's by himself. Because
that
he's isolated and alone. Every time they move, he's ripped up from everything he knows. So he has no one, essentially. Now, he'll recall as a boy removing the teeth of one of the pet rabbits that they had with pliers.
How?
With pliers.
No, but so...
Yeah, the poor bunny rabbit.
I would love to know how he managed to rip out the teeth of the bunny. So a couple years ago, our dogs were under a year old, and they caught a baby bunny in the dog pen. Mm-hmm. And my kids saved it. And we ended up keeping this bunny because we wanted to make sure it was okay, and it had some boo-boos, and it ended up being okay. And we had it for a very, very, very long time. But every time Jason would try to handle the bunny and it would be finally done being handled, the bunny would take its back feet, and they have some sharp claws, and then kick Jason's hand, and it would shred his hand. So I don't understand how this kid could sit there and hold a bunny down and rip out poor bunny.
Well, I don't know that the rabbit didn't do damage to him with some back toenails.
I would hope so, because that bunny should have been able to fight back. I guess maybe if he held the bunny between his legs, kind of not sat on him, but you know what I'm talking about, like straddled the bunny and squeezed with his thighs, kind of deal.
It will be being domesticated bunnies. It thought it was safe, so it's not trying to fight, and then it's not expecting to have its tooth ripped out. So it thinks it's in a trusting environment.
Poor thing.
But anywho, one of his other things that he did to try to get attention was he set the shed on fire.
I have a question.
Huh?
So he commits animal cruelty, arson. Is he also a bedwetter?
Not that I know of. Now, Bittaker will also claim he never had a birthday party. He also was never invited to one, or he never went to one. I don't know which one, because I can think that if you set the shed on fire and pluck out your bunny's teeth, you probably aren't being invited to many birthdays, but he said he didn't attend any, but I feel like he wasn't invited. So he will say his childhood, he just remembers feeling isolated and abandoned.
How old was he when he set the shed on fire?
Under 12.
Same with the bunny's teeth?
Yep.
All right.
Now, at the age of 12, he's arrested for the first time for shoplifting. Over the next 4 years, he'll be arrested several more times for the exact same thing.
What is he stealing, you know? Not that it matters, just curious.
I would imagine stupid little things. He's not going hungry, and he's not clothless, so it's not a survival thing. It's an attention seeking. I don't think he was trying to get away with shoplifting, because if he got in trouble, some sort of interaction.
Yeah.
But all of his criminal behavior was to compensate for the lack of love he received from his adoptive parents and his birth parents.
Yeah, whatever.
Which is what I say. It's like, that's you just not wanting to own up. So although he had an IQ of 138, he still managed to drop out of high school in 1957 when he was just 17. So he was almost a graduate. He just,
yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yeah. So within a year of dropping out of school, Bittaker is arrested for car theft, hit and run, and evading arrest. He's sent
all in one chart, like all in one shot, like.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Because if that was three separate, yeah.
He stole a car, he hit someone, he ran, and then he evaded being arrested, would be my guess. But since he's under 18, he's sent to a youth authority center, which I feel like is just a detention center for youths. So, yeah. But for whatever reason, California's got weird names for places. You'll see as we go. Now, during
it's also the 70s.
True. Now, during his sentence, he would go to the St. Gabriel Mountains on day trips, which will later be where he goes with future victims because he knows there's no one out there and they won't be able to hear his victims scream. So, mind you, he's 17, so he's just like, it doesn't say that anything happened to him while he was out there, and I don't think he's fantasizing at that point about taking people out there because it's quiet, but that's what makes him familiar with those mountains. But he would fantasize about finding and killing his birth mother all during his adolescent years, and blames her for making him into the monster that he is.
Again, I say way to take accountability.
I don't feel like she made him pluck the bunny's teeth out with pliers.
No
amount.
Or hit and run or steal cars or any of the shit that he's done. Set the shed on. That's not his fault. Or her fault.
So when he gets out of the youth center, he finds out his adoptive parents disowned him and moved out of state.
Ugh.
He will never see them again.
He legitimately never sees them again?
Never.
Holy shit.
So it kind of makes me think that they did treat him as, he was a burden rather than they wanted a child. They got him out of a bad situation. I get his mom and dad sucked and the aunt and uncle were trying to do right by him. But if they would have just let him get adopted by somebody who actually wanted a child, would that not have been a better option? I mean, I feel like they felt like they had to out of obligation, and that it wasn't helpful. No kid needs to live like that.
What I'm curious about is, okay, I would try to compare it to us, but like if I had one kid and then decided I didn't want him and put him in an orphanage and you and Dave adopted him, do you and I not ever speak? Like, how did he not know who his birth parents, like, you know what I mean?
So I feel like those two are probably the bad seeds of the family. I don't know what happened with his mom or his real dad. I don't even know what happens with his aunt and uncle because they cut him loose and no one talks to him. So he's orphaned.
And how old was he when that happened? 17?
Well, he gets released when he's 18. So he gets out and he's got no one and nowhere. So naturally, he'll turn back to crime because that's what he does.
It's more like, fuck it. I don't have anybody anyway, so.
So within days after his release, he's arrested for transporting a stolen vehicle and gets 18 months imprisonment. Now, I feel like it's part of the thing. He was probably homeless. Also, stealing the vehicle, I feel like he was probably homeless. So when he stole it, now it's crimes of necessity.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
But so he gets 18 months imprisonment. Now, when in the we'll go to 1960 is when he's released, and he's 20 by this point. He's out only a few months and then is rearrested in Los Angeles for robbery.
Good Lord.
He's sentenced to 15 years. Now,
oh my God.
during this sentence, he sees a psychiatrist who diagnoses him as being highly manipulative and able to conceal his hostility. Now, he is given 15 years, but he's paroled after serving only 2.
What?
Yeah. And
I thought they had to serve like half of their sentence before they could be paroled.
That might be the case now, but I don't know what's going on in the 60s and 70s. What's the point of sentencing somebody if it's just like, oh, we'll release them when we feel like it?
Yeah, okay. Huh.
Manipulative, that he's able to get out as often as he is. But after he's on parole, he's not even out a year before being arrested on parole violations. I don't know what specifically he violated, but he's not trying too hard to stay out of jail. So this puts him back in jail until 1966. And this is when he's examined by 2 independent psychiatrists who classify him as having a borderline psychopathic personality. And they label him as being highly manipulative and also unable to see the consequences of his actions. Now, during this time, he's prescribed antipsychotic medications. And then after a year, they release him from prison again.
Well, but hold up. If he has nobody, he has no job. I get that he can get his medications while he's locked up. What is he supposed to do when he gets out?
I don't think that there's really a plan when people get released, which is life is already hard. There you go. Figure it out.
Yeah.
And if you're already leaning towards criminal side because it's easier and you can achieve things quicker by cutting corners and taking from someone else than a legitimate way, that I feel like it just sets them up.
I agree.
But 1 month after his release, it's now July 1968, he's arrested again for theft and leaving the scene of an accident.
I've lost track of how many times this guy has been arrested. That's so much.
I know.
Do the cops know him by name? Is he in the same area? Because I feel like they walk in with him and they're just like, oh, our frequent flyer.
I feel like they're just like, you again. This time, he's sentenced to 5 years. But again, he gets out after serving less than 2 years. Now, shortly after he gets out this time, he is arrested again for burglary.
Well, I want to know who's the idiots that keep letting him out, because he doesn't even make it through the remainder of what would have been his sentence before he's arrested over and over and over again. Well, he got 15 years, serves 2. They let his ass out, and now he's been arrested 2 more times within that 15-year period that he should have been in jail in the first place.
Yes. Now,
smart.
Because he's on parole, he's sentenced to serve between 6 months and 15 years in 1971.
Okay, so what's he served? 2 days?
I was like, that's it. That's a pretty wide range there.
Yeah, but he was given 15 years and only did 2 years. So if he's got 6 months possibility, then what is it? A week? No.
Well, it's 1971 now.
Okay, so he served 2 days.
He serves 3 years and then is released from prison again. Now, that brings us to 1974. Bittaker is arrested almost immediately after getting released. Arrested for assault with an attempt to commit murder. Supermarket employee who accused him of shoplifting.
Wait.
Yeah. So the employee saw Bittaker steal a steak, followed him outside to the parking lot, and then Bittaker would claim that, oh, I just forgot to pay for these. I'm not shoplifting. And then stabs the employee in the chest when, the guy's like, no, you're fucking stealing this shit. You didn't forget to pay and walk out of the store and you were going to come back in and pay. No, sir. But he barely misses this guy's heart. Now, what I think's crazy is that Bittaker flees after he stabs this guy in the chest, right? Mm-hmm. 2 other employees pursue him, tackle his ass, and restrain him until the police get there.
Holy shit.
Right? And I can tell you, if I worked at the grocery store, I get like, if you see somebody shoplifting, that, hey, are you going to pay for that kind of thing? I'm not going to get stabbed in the chest for it. And if I see my coworker get stabbed in the chest, I'm not chasing the dude with the knife.
No.
Be like, he went that direction. But I'm going
to
render aid to my coworker. But the employee, it was Gary Louie. He lived. Bittaker was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, and he is sent to be incarcerated at the California Men's Colony, which is just a weird way of saying it's an all male facility. I think it's weird that they call it a men's colony, but that's what California calls it. We're going to switch to Norris.
Wait, how long did he get in jail?
I don't know.
Tell me it was probably like 15 years, because that's around the same time.
Let's face it, he doesn't serve the entire time ever. So I can tell you he does eventually get out, because obviously he and his buddy here go on to commit some murders.
Well, in the Mad Chopper episode that we did, the guy Lawrence Robinson, when he attempted to kill the teenage girl, he got 15 years and only did the 7 years of the sentence. So I'm going to assume, since it's both attempted murder, same time period, same area, they just liked him for 15 years and let him out early every time. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember what he was sentenced with, but he gets out in 4 years on parole. Yeah. So
sounds about right with his 15-year sentence.
I don't see how he didn't get charged with attempted murder, because he stabbed the guy in the heart. He just missed.
Wait. He didn't get charged with attempted murder?
No, he was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon.
What?
And I would say, with considering his criminal history up till this point, they don't lock him up and throw away the key.
Yeah, I don't either. They should.
And we're going to put a pin in Bittaker for the time being and go to Norris, because it's where Bittaker is right now that Norris and him meet. So we're gonna
in jail. Wait, they meet in jail?
Yep, spoiler alert. So we're gonna put a pin in Bittaker's in jail over there and give you a little background on our boy Norris. He's born Roy Lewis Norris in Greeley, Colorado on February 5th, 1948. So he's born out of wedlock, and his parents marry to avoid the stigma surrounding
a bastard child.
Yes. Yeah. So now his father works in a scrapyard. His mom is a drug addicted housewife. So from childhood to adolescence, he bounces back and forth from living with his parents to being repeatedly placed in foster families based on the neglect that his parents have with him. And I would imagine also how many times his mother is pulled out of the house and there's nobody there to watch him, that scenario. So he bounces back and forth. Now, Norris will claim that many of his foster families also neglected him and would frequently withhold food and clothing from him. So he struggled his whole adolescence. He would also claim that one of the families sexually abused him.
I mean,
it was never reported, so it's one of those how much you want to believe from serial killers.
So I don't know enough about what these guys do. Like, I know what they're gonna do, but I don't know if he's like the guy that would take responsibility for his shit. You know?
So between the two of these two, Norris seems to be the one who has a conscience.
So that to me, and I realize that this may sound a little twisted, but if this guy, Roy, is more owns up to his bad behavior, then not saying he should be trusted in any way, shape, or form, but I would put a little more weight into the things that he's saying, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
Now,
instead of using it as an excuse for bad behavior, it's just like, well, this is what happened to me. Yeah, I did some screwed up stuff, but this is also what happened to me. Instead of making it like, I did this because.
yeah. So I don't have what his IQ was, but I do feel like he's not the brains of the operation. And then with Bittaker being manipulative, I do feel like it's Norris doing things because out of fear and being manipulated. That's the role I think these two play. It's like Pinky in the Brain. But so when he's 16, at this time he's living with his birth parents, but they go to visit a female relative and she's in her early 20s. Well, Norris begins to speak to her in a sexually suggestive manner. I don't know what the little turd says to her, but she orders him out of her house and then tells his dad what he did. Now, his dad, in turn, threatens to beat him for his behavior. So Norris decides, fine, fuck you all. He steals his dad's car, drives out to the Rocky Mountains, where he tries to commit suicide by injecting air into his artery in his arm. It does not work. He's eventually picked up by the police as a runaway and returned to his parents.
How old was he?
16.
Okay.
So when he gets home, his parents decide to tell him that, well, you know what? We didn't want you. We didn't want your little sister. You were an accident. And you know what? We only got married because of you. So fuck this. We're getting divorced. Figure your life out.
I say it's important to not,
it's not
blame the kids. No, these parents took the polar opposite. Like, they're the original. Don't do this. Don't tell your kid that they're the reason you're getting divorced.
Yeah.
Oh my.
So a year later, Norris drops out of school and joins the U.S. Navy, where he's stationed in San Diego in 1965. Now, this is on the during the Vietnam era, and he does get deployed in 1969, which is about 4 years into his Navy career. And although he does not see combat when he's over in Vietnam for 4 months, he is honorably discharged from the Navy when he gets home. I don't know. Other than I feel like his contract was up, so he was honorably discharged. But I thought it was weird that he only served 4 months.
I'm going to say he was too stupid.
Probably. They were like, thanks, but yeah.
Yeah, no. Thanks, bye.
We don't need you anymore. We're going to do this war without you, fella. So in November 1969, Norris is arrested for his first sexual offense. So he forces his way into the car of a woman sitting by herself. He's charged with assault with attempt to commit rape. So I feel like since it's only the attempt, he was unsuccessful for whatever reason.
And of course he'll get a life sentence because, like we've noticed, he failed. So they're going to give him a chance to learn from it and try again.
Yes, because 3 months later, he knocks on a woman's door and tries to convince her to let him in. She refuses. So he attempts to break into her home. While he's trying to do that, the woman calls the police, who get there and arrest Norris before he had the opportunity to cause any harm.
And again, try again. Which, by the way, not to backtrack, but I tell my kids to never sit in a car by yourself with the doors unlocked. If you get in a car and you're going to sit there, be aware of your surroundings for sure, but lock your doors. So I don't care if it's daytime, nighttime, whatever. Lock the damn doors.
So we're talking why I don't like to sit in my car, and I'll be like, so I'm going to go clock in.
Yeah.
Because I realize I run freakishly early, but you don't know what kind of wackadoodles in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And you got to rely on the fact that you're aware enough, and if they're stupid enough to be able to be seen, or how crafty are they. But Now, shortly after this arrest, Norris is diagnosed with severe schizoid personality, which is a disorder described as a person showing lack of interest in social relationships, with a tendency to be alone, secretive, or detached. Typically, people who have severe schizoid personality disorder are unable to develop intimate relationships with others and kind of live in their own fantasy world.
I mean, he's trying to have intimate relationships.
Well, in his fantasy
Sorry, it's
world,
not funny.
In his fantasy world, that's probably how things work. Now, he gets out on bail for this offense, and he's on one of the California campuses. He attacks a female student that he had been stalking that day. He walks up to her, hits her in the back of the head with a rock. When she falls to the ground face first, he grabs her hair and starts beating her head against the sidewalk with his knee in her lower back.
Jesus.
Norris is charged with assault with a deadly weapon, and I'm ashamed to say I laughed because he had a rock.
Yeah, but your other case that we did, they smashed her brains in
with a rock. I didn't know that if you were wielding a rock, it was classified as a deadly weapon.
I think anything could be classified as a deadly weapon if it's enough to.
Fine, Andrea. But he is sent to the Atascadero State Hospital for 5 years. This is where he is classified as a mentally disordered sex offender, which I'd never heard before.
Interesting.
Now, Norris is released in 1975, and he's on probation for 5 years because he's deemed no further danger to others.
Wait, how is that a thing?
So I guess since they feel like, they'll give him some meds. After 3 months after his release, Norris sees a woman walking home from a restaurant and offers her a ride on his motorcycle, to which she says no. Norris gets upset by that, so he parks his motorcycle, grabs the woman by her scarf, twists it around her neck, and drags her to a nearby bush where he tries to rape her. The woman thought she was going to die, so she doesn't resist the rape. She does go to the police, but unfortunately, they can't find Norris because she doesn't have a good description of him, like the motorcycle or anything. She just knows he was on a motorcycle. But a month later, Norris is puttering around in the same area on his motorcycle, and she's walking the same sidewalk and sees him pass her. So she writes down the license plate number and gives it to the police immediately, to which they go out and arrest Norris for rape and send him to the California men's colony, which is where Bittaker is right now.
Oh, fun. Which, by the way, kind of funny that
he was motoring around in the same area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say he attacked her again. I was going to be like, oh my gosh, this poor woman.
No, I could just see her. Although for me, I guess if she's got to take that path to like bus stops or whatever, you're kind of limited on which direction you can go. But if it's a month later, and I could just imagine walking there and then just seeing the motorcycle go by and be like, is that same piece of shit? It sure is. Let me get my pencil out. Fucking asshole. Well, guess what, fella? You're going away now. Okay, so now while serving time, Norris and Bittaker meet, and then this is when they like bond over their fantasies of raping and murdering young girls. And I don't know which one of them come up with it, but they decide that they're going to kill somebody from the age of 12 to 18, one for each year. They come up with their little schemes and like tell them to each other back and forth. They make jewelry together in prison.
What?
Which include
what kind of jewelry?
Like decorative crosses and things. I did see a few of them, which I was like, they kind of look like rosaries. But when it said originally that they did jewelry together or decorated jewelry together, I was like, they're sitting there with the bedazzling gun talking about raping little girls. How do they have a bedazzler in prison?
Can I also point out that if they're making like crosses and stuff, I don't understand why so many criminals cling to religion like they do.
Yeah.
Like, do they not understand what religion is about?
I don't think so. They're not focused on that. But I just thought it was funny that they're sharing these fantasies and just playing with their beads.
A little bedazzler.
No, I don't know that they had a bedazzler in prison.
I know, but it's funny to
I
pretend.
know. Like, no.
Did they sell it or did they give it away to people?
No, they did. They sold the jewelry.
To other inmates, or like
I don't know, Andrea.
or to
Like,
some of the freaking weirdos that like to write to people in prison and befriend them.
Probably that too. But they would tell a fellow inmate, Richard Shootman, about their fantasies of rape and murder. Shootman would write them up and sell the stories to other inmates.
Ew.
Yeah.
He was writing like the rape porn.
Yeah. Now, since Norris is serving time for rape, he thinks the idea of murdering victims to avoid more jail time is a great idea.
Of course. And of course, neither one of these men got any real sentence because they failed to accomplish whatever they're set out to do. And therefore, you know that they were given a light sentence because it's the 70s and they're going to get out to try again. So
again, I don't know what Norris's IQ is. Keep in mind, Bittaker's a smart. 18 of his prior 20 years are in jail. Like his prior 20 years of life, he spent 18 of his last 20 years in jail, which is crazy.
Who, Lawrence?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, he's going to serve less than 4 years after pleading guilty to assault with a deadly weapon on the whole stabbing of the supermarket employee. So he gets out in November 1978. He's 39 at this point. He gets out a few months before Norris. And he's able to get a job as a machinist, making $1,000 a week for an aircraft manufacturing company, which in 78, even today, $1,000 a week, that's not a bad job.
No, but that's a lot of money.
In 1978, $1,000 a week? I mean, yeah. Considering he's on parole?
That's a crazy amount of money.
Yeah. So when Norris gets out of prison a few months later, they get together. They buy a van together. It's a 1977 GMC cargo van with a sliding side door and no side windows. They name it Murder Mac.
Of course they did. Did they paint it down the side of the van? Because that would just make it amazing.
They install a bed in the back and even a cooler, a little toolbox that has a collection of tools in it, and then a little spot to store their spare clothes. So Norris and Bittaker decide to go out in their new van on a trip to the St. Gabriel Mountains so Bittaker can show Norris the remote area that they could put bodies. Now, during this little trip, Bittaker takes a picture of Norris pointing down a ravine. Now, face value, this picture looks innocent enough because it just looks like he's pointing towards a ravine. But later on, the police determine that is where they throw a body. Like the exact location where he's pointing is later where they throw one of these girls. So in 1979, Bittaker is still living in a rundown motel. So it's just weird to me. He's making decent money, but he chooses to live in a rundown motel. I guess it's because he can blend in. Because there's other people who are living out of the motel.
Or he just doesn't have a desire to live beyond that, you know?
Yeah.
That's not where his priorities are.
So at this time, he has a neighbor. Her name's Tracy. She's 18 at the time. And she's early in her pregnancy. And Bittaker would be super nice to her. He would give her and her friends money, beer, weed. And she would say he was always super nice to her and but that was also, I think, since Bittaker's mom was a teenage pregnancy, that he has a soft spot for pregnant women, which is weird.
That is weird.
Because I would think since he hates his mother, it's weird that he is kind to pregnant women.
Yeah, it's super weird. Unless he respects the fact that maybe like they had a conversation and he knows she plans to keep her. And therefore,
he likes her.
But if she made the mistake of saying she was going to get rid of her baby or give it away,
she'd be dead.
Probably.
I'm just surprised none of her friends were a victim. Although I guess they're too old. He wanted 18 and under.
Yeah.
But he would drive her to the beach in that Murder Mac van, and the two of them would spend a lot of time alone in the van, just like hanging out.
Does she die?
No.
Okay, so then when this all comes to light, I couldn't imagine being in her shoes.
That's where her interview, she thinks it's crazy that there were times she probably was in that van and it was after they had done an abduction, that this whole time she's his neighbor and doesn't know the things that he's doing or has done. But so he would drive her to the beach, and she doesn't remember what they argued about. But one of the last time she was alone with him in the van, they got into an argument. He pulls a gun on her and said that the only reason she's alive right now was because she's pregnant. Now, naturally, she freaks the fuck out, jumps out of the van, and skedaddles.
Smart girl.
And has nothing to do with Bittaker after that. So
does she move her hotel room or motel room to a different room?
I feel like she probably did, because that's the last she ever interacts with him. So I feel like you'd have to, if you were neighbors, that'd be a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
But that is going to be the end of our part 2, because after
part 1.
Oh, yeah, you know what I mean.
It's part 2.
Shut up, Andrea. That is the end of our part 1. Our part 2 is going to be, now that Norris and Bittaker have laid out their plans of where they're going to put their victims, and they've got their van, they've decked it out, they're ready
and raring to go.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.